with this 3420 channel, people are going to be very busy. The intimacy is going to become less. Sexual aspects are going to become less important.
I wonder if it's more of a lean toward like being asexual versus like Tinder hookup culture.
This is where human design and even astrology is extremely helpful, because we're kind of getting prepared as to what is coming, and that provides us with more understanding and acceptance, in my opinion.
HeartCore, the Human Design Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to HeartCore, the Human Design Podcast. I'm Chel. That's Miko. Hey.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Celestina.
Happy New Year, guys. We are there. We've made it. Happy 2025. But you probably knew that already. Anyway, hello from the past, hello from the future. We're excited to be here. Today we are talking a little bit more about the past / a little bit more about the future, talking about locks and keys. And yes, they are what they sound like. You put a key into a hole, you turn it kind of, sort of, but there's a lot more to it. We're talking about the gates in human design. And I'm going to let Miko take the lead on this because she sent me several videos to watch. I watched them, and it's still a lot of information. And she has a plan of action today. So I'm not going to mess that up. I'm here for comedic relief. Miko, take us away. Take us to the places of the keys and the locks. Thank you.
Fantastic intro. So yeah, we've entered 2025. Well, as Celestina already said, we're recording in 2024, and we've entered the official new year. So this is the internationally recognized, let's say it that way. I mean, the Chinese have a different new year, as we know, the Indians do, and even human design does. So 2025 in human design starts like every year in human design on the 22nd of January. But for the sake of this episode, Happy New Year for everyone that has crossed the 1st of January 2025. We are starting this episode simply by first explaining what locks and keys are. What does that even mean? Because that in the first place can be extremely confusing when you first hear of this concept. And I would like to share the screen as a first step. So here you can see the global cycles, and this goes back to 16,513 BC, which, yes, of course, you can go that far back, and you can also go that far into the future. As you can see, it goes all the way to 3,674 AD if you're watching. If you're not watching, this is an Excel sheet which I just learned last time that Celestina is very much into Excel sheets. So she could have probably created something similar to this with all the color coding and everything. Very beautiful. So if you're watching, what you can see here is that we have the cross of planning here, and we have the cross of Maya here. So if you're looking all the way at the top, you will see cross of vessel of love and cross of the Sphinx. And these will become important. You can also see them just above from 33 BC to 378 AD. They create the G-center gates. And the G-center gates are the locks. So they remain the same throughout history. They are always going to be the same locks. This is, I think, where we should start to first explain what are the locks and what are the keys. So in this case, the locks are the gates of the G-center. This is what never changes. It stays the same throughout history. And we can see these yellow defined gates around the mandala. So if you're watching, it would be very helpful if you would see this on the screen. If you're just listening, I'm going to try to explain it as well as I can. And it kind of creates a star pattern. So all the gates that are defined here, that are yellow here, those are the G-center gates. They are made up of 2 crosses. One is the cross of the vessel of love, and the other one is the cross of the Sphinx. The cross of the vessel of love is made up out of the 10th gate, the 46th gate, the 15th gate, and the 25th gate. And the cross of the Sphinx is 13th gate, 1st gate, 7th gate, and 2nd gate. So these are all the gates in the G center. They remain the same. These are all the locks. So this is an important part to understand. You can also see that every lock has a specific name to it. We have all the way at the top the 10th gate, the nature, that's what it's called. Then we have the 1st gate, which is the example. The 46th gate is the temple. The 7th gate is the leader. The 15th gate is the pattern. The 2nd gate is the plan. The 25th gate is the way. And the 13th gate is called the witness. What exactly that means, we're going to get into that further down the line. We also decided to break up this episode into 2 parts because there's a lot of information here. And this is basically just introducing you to what the locks and keys even mean without going into each individual gate for now. So what we're going to do is we're going to first go through the vessel of love gates, explain them, and explain where we're coming from and what we're moving into. You can also kind of see this in this picture already. All the yellow numbers inside of the mandala. So those are the ones that we are currently in. We are currently in gate 9, gate 32, gate 40, gate 62, gate 16, gate 42, gate 37, and gate 61. And those are creating the cross of planning, and they are creating the cross of Maya. So these are the 2 crosses that we're currently in. And we will then be moving into the cross of the sleeping phoenix, which a lot of people may have heard of if you're aware of human design. And we're also moving into the cross of penetration. So a lot of times people will only speak of, for example, us moving from the cross of planning into the cross of the sleeping phoenix. But this is just one part of what we're going to be experiencing. Because the cross of planning and the cross of the sleeping phoenix are only representing the external world. So this is all about what we're experiencing outside of us. However, the cross of Maya and the cross of penetration are what we're experiencing internally. And this is also going to be a very important point to recognize, that these 2 crosses are split into 2, what we're experiencing outside of us and what we're experiencing inside of us. When we are going back to the other image that I was showing you, you can now maybe understand it a little better, why there are 2 crosses that you will see in, for example, currently our time 1615 to 2026. We have the cross of planning in our external world and the cross of Maya in our internal world. These are the 2 parts that we're currently experiencing. Moving in 2027, so this is the very famously known date, which is why I find it a bit confusing why it is showing 1615 to 2026. Because it actually starts in February 2027, this cross of the sleeping phoenix. And that being said, cross of the sleeping phoenix and cross of penetration both start in February 2027. And that being said, it's not going to just be a switch, bam, in February 2027. It is a gradual shift that we're already experiencing, that we're already feeling. And maybe you would like to say a little bit about the example that you've mentioned earlier before we started this conversation, because I actually feel like it's a very good example to see how things are already starting to shift.
Yeah. So this energy is shifting from tribal familial energy into more individual energy. And I feel like, just taking the US as an example, I think we're seeing that a lot already, right? One, in non-traditional families, in people speaking up for themselves, I think a little bit more as individuals versus like families. But we're also seeing the family stronghold of the 50s, at least that's what I think of, like the 50s to like the 70s, the family stronghold, the strength, the like patriarch leader of those families holding on for dear life right now because of this shift that we're having towards the individual. And if you notice, there's a lot of rhetoric out there that still wants to hang on to the controlling side of the of this tribal familial energy, even though as a whole we are shifting more towards the individual. So I think it's just very interesting to see. I don't want to get too much into politics, right? But like, it's very interesting to see that this is already shifting and has already been shifting for maybe the past like 3 or 4 years. So it's just really interesting to see that our world politics are being affected, or maybe vice versa, right? But our world politics are being affected by kind of this universal change that we're all experiencing. And I've looked back at different points in history, and it's really cool to see the shifts that happen over the centuries that can somewhat be explained by like the positions of the planets, so like astrology to some extent, as well as looking back the transits during that period of time too. So it's just so interesting to see all of it, and we are in the midst of like a massive shift right now. With this knowledge, I think just be aware of your surroundings, be aware of what's happening in the outside world. And I think just having this insight can be really helpful to moving forward. And again, it's not that we like have the winning lottery numbers. I just think it's helpful to understand what's happening and that we are greatly affected by the energy around us, and it's not always up to us. So yeah, just leaving you guys with that to noodle with.
Also, what I wanted to mention is that the videos that I had sent to Celestina were from John Sage Dempsey, and I really appreciate his insights a lot. And the reason why I'm mentioning it now is because this historical impact of the transits, or the shifting of these locks and keys, which is essentially the planets transiting into these locks and keys. So every 411 years, there's this shift that is occurring. And within this time frame, to really look at what has come about. So when you're again just looking at these intervals, you can always see a theme that is occurring within these time frames. And the way that we're also going to explain these keys that are shifting is also by looking at the lines. And each line has a very heavy impact on how this evolutionary process takes place. Because when you're looking at a human design body graph, you will see that these lines, for example, the profile, that is shifting from first line to second line to third line to fourth line to fifth line to sixth line. However, when we're looking at cycles, we're going backwards from sixth line to fifth line to fourth line to third line to second line and to first line. And the reason why this becomes very impactful is because we're not starting with a solid foundation. We're starting at the other end. We're starting as the role model, as a transitioning element. And yes, the first line is also transitioning, but it is about digging deep into the foundation, understanding why something is important. And this is for understanding of the gates. I always like to say, okay, understand all the lines, because when you're understanding all the lines, you can understand what something is building onto. So the first line is really about understanding the foundation, going deep into the roots, even questioning if this is really the way to go. For example, the 40th gate is making pacts and making deals, for example. And that is also what marriage is about. You have a deal where you enter into this contract of marriage. At least this is what the last 400 and plus years was about. You enter into the marriage and you have a deal. You know what each of you expects of the other. And back then it was, okay, the husband goes to work, the wife stays at home, takes care of the kids, and cooks the food that the husband brings home by providing with money, basically. So then, yes, of course, the wife would go out, would go shopping, things like this, but the husband would bring home the money and he would work from 9 to 5, and then he would go home and he would want to rest. And this 40th gate is a big thing in the past, as you can see here. This is part of the cross of planning. It is 3740. A lot of people had this channel. A lot of people have this in their incarnation cross, and it's a very important part of our last 400 years. However, this is shifting dramatically, and this is breaking down at the moment. So there's not going to be this emphasis on, okay, I do this for you, but then in turn you do that for me. And in this bargain or in this contract, it was basically, I go to work, I work from 9 to 5, I bring home the money, and then when I get home, I would like my alone time, which is a very important part of the 40th gate, where you really retrieve, you have your alone time, or you maybe even get pampered by your spouse. You get pampered because they take care of you with the food that they cooked, or they give you a foot rub, or whatever it may be. But it's really also about having this alone time. And we're going to dive deeper into that once we get to explaining the lock and the keys that are relevant for where that were relevant, or that still currently are relevant, but that are shifting into another relevance. But the reason why I'm mentioning the gate 40 was because it was with gate 40.1, it was really about understanding, do I really need to go into this contract? Do I really need to have this bargain? What is the bargain about? Like really understanding everything about this gate. And then you would shift to line 2, where you would try to kind of implement it a little bit. So you've kind of gathered the understanding. Now we're stepping into action. We're trying to implement that. But we're still more in the theoretical phase of it. In line 3, we're already stepping into the action. We don't just want to understand it theoretically. We want to experiment with it and really try it out, fall down, get back up, try it out. Line 4 is then about bringing other people into this experimentation as well. Line 5 is then already externalizing it and being really good at it already. It's kind of known as the ideal family in gate 40. This is what people look at and they're like, yeah, they are the perfect family. And then line 6 is kind of already transitioning. So the reason why I'm explaining all of this is because this becomes very important when we're going through it backwards. It changes everything when we're having to go through it backwards. So in this next cycle, we are now moving from line 1. So you will have all of these gates, 37, 40, 9, 16, 61, 62, 32, and 42. They are all currently in line 1. And we're moving into a line 6. So this then also becomes very important when it comes to the keys and the locks that you currently have. If you have a lock or a key to these the gates from the G center, for example, are the locks. So if you have a lock in line 1 and we're moving into line 6, you will have a challenge fitting in because line 1 doesn't harmonize with line 6's. Line 6 goes with line 3. So the third lines are going to resonate with this 6-line future as well, because that's something that can still be understood. And for everyone that knows this, line 6 always go through the line 3 phase as well. So that's why a line 6 will always understand the line 3 world. Thankfully, we get to kind of move out of it. I mean, I'm happy for us being able to move out of it, but I'm also not a third line. A third line, they at some point are like, okay, this is my life, and this is how I learn. This is how I understand the world. So for them, when they have a positive attitude in life, they actually cherish this. They are born for these challenges. And really, when you're talking to a line 3 that has really understood this, they are even trying to find challenges like that. Yeah, this is another point that I find very interesting when it comes to this next chapter, just because it's also connected to your lines. Even if you do have keys, but they don't resonate with that line, it is still going to take you some time to adapt to this new energy. Would you like to add something? The other interesting aspect that I find is that everyone that was born in this cross of planning, so every single one of us, because it's not so long ago, it's very long ago that it started. That's what I mean. But every one of us is born in the cross of planning. So we are still all going to resonate with the current keys. So the gates that are in the current key position, we are going to resonate with these. And we kind of understand the world in that way as well. It, however, really also depends which lines are defining it. So it's going to change if you're born before the 60s. Your line is a second line back then, and when you're born even further than that, you turn into a third line. However, I don't even think that's possible unless you're a vampire. But yeah, crazier things have happened. It's just going to be a very interesting transition that is going to happen in many, 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 many different ways. And as Celestina already said, we're already starting to feel it. So I think this is a very, very long introduction to the locks and keys, but I feel like it was necessary for everyone to really gather the foundation of what we're going to be talking about. And I'm not sure if I missed anything, but if I did, let me know. Then let's start with getting to know the locks and the keys of now and the keys of after 2027. So we're going to start with the gates of the vessel of love. If you're watching, you can see here again that we have lots of numbers on the screen. In the middle, you will see the locks of the vessel of love and the Sphinx. The top ones are the vessel of love, the 4 gates of the vessel of love cross, and the bottom ones are the cross of the Sphinx gates. We are going to go through the lock gates, so vessel of love and Sphinx, and then we're going to explain what we have experienced up to now and what we are going to experience coming 2027 all the way to 2438 to all the vampires out there. Shout out. Let us know how that went, because when I was listening to that, I was like, oh my god, gate 34.3 seems to be very, very wild. So 34.3 era, people that have the 34.3, they have some outbursts sometimes where one of them was describing how she was breaking the toy of her kids that they were arguing over. Her kids were arguing, and then she grabbed the toy and just tore it apart, apparently, just to make a point. And that is very much the 34.3 energy. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting era. I won't be around to see it, at least not in this body. But yeah, let's see what happens. So first, focus on this area. And this is also going to be a very major theme. Focus. But let's start with gate 25 as the lock and gate 37 as having been the key to our existence until now. Gate 25 is known as the way. That's the keynote. And for everyone that is new to human design, you're probably not listening to our podcast because we are usually covering things that are very intense. But just in case, if you are new to human design, every gate has a keynote. And in this case, it does have a different kind of keynote when you're talking about these locks. So when you're looking at the gates in the traditional human design way, when you're reading someone's chart, every gate has keynotes as well. But in this case, the keynotes for these cycles, for these locks, are different. So gate 25 is called the way. And that is basically saying how everyone is supposed to be, or what is the way for this generation, for the last generation, 1615 to 2020. I'm just going to say 2027 because that's how I understand it until February. So for this generation, as Celestina already mentioned, the way was family. And it was really much about, so for example, one thing that I kept hearing, or that I'm sure many of you kept hearing or keep hearing still, is you need to find a mate. Otherwise, what are you going to do without having a family around? And that is very much shifting. So it's going to take some time for people to stop saying it. It's going to take probably until this generation has died out. So everyone that is born up to 2027 will have more or less of this mindset that the way is family, and what are you going to do without it? And you have to stick together. And yeah, that's just how it is. So if you can remember, the gate 37 and gate 40 are very much connected to one another because they create a channel. And that is a very, very prominent channel in this past generation. Like, I don't know how many years, but it is also a channel that comes up much more than certain other channels because they are parts of incarnation crosses. So a lot of incarnation crosses, or some incarnation crosses, have this channel, and therefore they just come up more throughout human design readings than others. And this is really the one that is very much connected to the bargain. Gate 37 and gate 40 just have this interplay towards one another. Gate 37 is a lot about touching and hugging people as well. It's kind of, okay, you bring home the food, or you bring home the money for me to purchase food. You do this in order for me to touch you, to hug you, to kiss you. Like, there is this sometimes unspoken bargain, but it's like, okay, these are the rules. So for us, this is something that we probably see more in our parents. What do you feel? I mean, do you think this is still something that is very present today, or do you feel like this is something that has shifted throughout the times.
That's challenging for me to say because 40's in my chart, so I feel it like pretty heavily. You know what I mean? So
Okay.
I'm biased in that way because I feel it. I don't know if I have the right answer for that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have that. That's I don't have that. It's for me this tribal aspect, or also when I'm looking at the gates of the future, the keys of the future, I can resonate with that, and I have a feeling that I'm not going to be latching on too much on the past keys. And I'm wondering if that's the case because I just don't have that much tribal energy. I don't have any tribal channels. Or if it's because we were born closer to the shift. So I wonder that kids, if kids are born now, they already kind of have the impact of the future gates in them because it's already kind of transitioning, and they're also being brought up into this new cycle. So when I was looking at people talking about that, they said that everyone that is born before 2027 is still going to be latching on to the gates quite a bit. And I just felt like maybe there's still a difference. I mean, for sure, there's a difference if you were born 50 years ago and if you're born now, because you're already going to feel the shift, but you're also going to be raised by the culture around you that is already shifting into this different direction. So yeah, for sure our grandparents would be different.
Totally. I feel like family was so key for them, right? Like it was wild for my grandmother to have moved to a different continent in the 50s. You know, like that was, I mean, granted, it wasn't unheard of, but like there wasn't much opportunity in Italy, so it kind of had to happen. But I think leaving family like that was like, what are you doing? And now I've lived on 3 different continents. My parents are probably still not super stoked on that, but it's definitely shifted to being like, you know what, just let her live her life. You know what I mean? And I feel like there's less of a stigma around that. So yeah, I can see the shift in there, but also I'm stupid tribal, like so tribal. So my peeps are my peeps and I'm going to fight for them regardless of like distance, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's just a very interesting space to be because I'm still stuck in that because it's me, you know?
It's an interesting point that you're bringing up, because the fact that I would fight for the people that I love is very much inside of me. I think this is, I mean, I do have the fighter in the gate 37, 38, this whole combination. So I do have this, I fight for what is right. And I fight for, but this is regardless of them being my family or not. Like, even if I would see a stranger on the street who would get molested or something, I would go up and I would really stop it from happening. So I think it's more of a right or wrong, but I do feel very, very protective over my family.
Like vigilante vibes. Like for the common good, vigilante vibes.
Yeah. Like Robin Hood, I could always identify with Batman. Yes, totally.
Yeah, I don't have that. You have to be my people.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like, I'll do something. I mean, if someone's getting hurt on the street, I will do what I can to stay safe and also help them. But, like, I will go out of my way, bend over backwards if you are my people.
Yeah. Okay. I kind of have that for both. Like, for strangers, even, I would, I'm not going to say that on here, but it's just... Yeah, I would go very, very, very far. Too far, probably.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Excellent side note. Tangent.
excellent. Interesting. So what we're now stepping into, so we're going from 37.1, which is really understanding what that means in the first place, having a family. So yeah, we have tried to understand what that really means, having a family, and now we're stepping into gate 55.6. So we're really jumping into a whole different transformative cycle. And on top of that, gate 55 is connected to abundance, and it's a very unstable emotional wave. So it's kind of like going from I'm in love, I'm not in love. I'm happy, I'm not happy. I don't know if I'm happy. Am I happy? Like it's really just very confusing and all over the place. Am I getting provoked or am I not getting provoked? So for gate 55 individuals, if you have that in your chart, it's super, super, super important to only eat when you're in the mood to eat, to only make love when you're in the mood to make love, to only work when you're in the mood to work. Okay, that last part could become very complicated with a boss if you have one. And if you want to make money, because sometimes you just have to work and you don't. You're not in the mood. But it is unhealthy for people that have gate 55 and even the channel going up 1222. Same thing. Really important to listen to your mood, to only talk when you're in the mood to talk. So all of these things become very important because otherwise it becomes very, very unhealthy for you to do these things when you're not in the mood. And gate 55.6 is the line of selfishness. And this, I really liked diving into this aspect because it's the selfishness of the soul or of the self. And it is not an ego selfishness. So that's where it gets a bit confusing and complicated. But an ego selfishness is really, I do this regardless of how it affects you. But this is not what this is about. This is about taking care of yourself in order to be able to become the best version of yourself, in order to be able to really connect with your soul and to connect with spirit. And the reason why I mentioned the food aspect is because that is very important when it comes to our evolution, our way forward. So right now we're still in gate 25, which is showing us the way. And the new way is going to be about taking care of our physical body, nourishing it in order to evolve spiritually or in order to really become the best version of ourselves. And this goes back to a topic that we mentioned several times throughout our episodes, that when we're talking about these things, about these self-growth, self-evolution aspects, you can't do that if you're worried about survival. You can't do that if you don't have a roof over your head every day and every night. And you can't do that if you don't have enough resources, not enough water, not enough food. So this is what this is about. It is a selfishness in the way that you need to take care of your basic needs before you can even elevate, before you can get to the next level. So yeah, we're basically moving from family to spirit. Caring about your spirit through selfishness in that way, but without expectations onto yourself, and also expectations of others, of course, because this is really a journey that you're going for yourself. You're not going it with others. It's this kind of selfishness. And this is what the theme we're going to see a lot, which is really about your own strengths, your own power in the now, your own individualism, your own evolution. It's that kind of way we're moving towards.
I feel like we're already seeing the physical piece of it come into play, right? Like, think about how people worked out in the 50s versus how people have started to care more about themselves, their health in the last decade, right? That shift in the last 70 years, I think, has been monumental. So it's really interesting that we've seen that aspect of this already come into play. That tied in with the individual piece of it, I think, is going to be even more interesting. So it's really cool, again, to like look back, see how this has slowly come into being over the last several decades as well.
Absolutely. And also what I really liked was John Sage Dempsey's explanation of, for example, this light bulb and the Shakespeare and the, like, when you're looking at when all of these things happened, you can really connect it to the gates and the lines of that period, which I find super fascinating. So yes, absolutely, completely agree with you that we have already started to see this shift. And I think, or I feel like it's becoming more and more. And maybe it's because I'm biased, because I've created a program that is literally about all of this, where you are honing in on what it is you need. You help yourself become the best version of yourself by really working on your physical, then working on your psyche, working on your energy, and then uplifting through to the spiritual elements. But this is literally what opportunity is about. It's really about exactly this quote unquote selfish aspect, which is necessary for it to also radiate to the outside world, which is another very important part of this gate 25, lock 25 shifting into gate 55, where you are doing all of this work in order to create this on the outside as well. So yeah, the reason why I'm mentioning this creation on the outside as well is because the vessel of love is the external locks that we're talking about here. Then let's shift to gate 46, the temple. Also one that I really like, because it is about where do people go to, well, pray, but there's another word for it, worship. Worship is probably one that I prefer more. Gate 46, the temple, where you go to worship. Worship, not worship. Where you go to worship. And back then, or even still now, we're not even in 2025 yet, but somehow I keep feeling like this energy is becoming stronger and stronger. So what I want to say is, back then, that's how it feels. But it was the bargain, the gate 40, the bargain was the temple, or is currently still the temple. And it's what we kind of already mentioned a little bit, that it was about, or it is still about, the temple of aloneness. And what I found super interesting as well, the way that we can explain it, was it became more and more important to be on your own as well in the last decades, because we've only started to have this opportunity in the last decades. Back in the day, we were in small apartments. There wasn't really these large houses where everyone could have their own bedroom. It was a shared space most of the time, because the population that was very, very rich to afford this was much smaller. These days, we do have our own spaces, our own bedrooms at least. Not everyone, but of course not everyone, but it became more of a norm. And so this temple of aloneness was a very important part of it, but it's now turning into gate 59. So from gate 40, Temple of Aloneness, and also being part of the bargains and the channel 3740, it is now turning into the 59. And the 59 is it's connected to the 59.6, and the 59.6, so not the channel 59.6, but the 59.6 is going to be the church of sexual hustler, orgasms, and dispersion. So this is part of a role gate. There are several different role gates in human design, and this is one of them. And maybe we should do an episode on role gates, just FYI, because that is yet another very interesting topic. So for now, role gates, in this case, gate 59, it doesn't necessarily say this is who the person is, but it is a role that they are playing. And 59.6 is known as the one night stand or the soulmate. So this is the 6th line. There are every line in the 59.1 would have a different role to it. The first line would be pursuer, pursued. The second line would be boldness or shyness. The third line would be bonds made or broken. The fourth line is about confident or not. So friendship needs to be there, or it's not there in order to make a relationship out of it. You do need friendship in the fourth line. Then the 5th line is seducer, seduced. And the 6th line is soulmate or one night stand. And we're basically moving into that aspect, soulmate or one night stand. And there are, of course, many different ways to interpret that. So one way would be that traditional relationships are breaking down. We're moving into a more one-night stand kind of focused direction. Another way to interpret that is that only soulmates are going to be important as relationships. And when we're looking at all of this together as when we are looking at a human design body graph, that's also super important to look at the whole body graph and not just take individual aspects of it. So when we're looking at this whole shift all together, we know that 2027, the emotional solar plexus is turning into an awareness center. So from a motor center into an awareness center. We also know that the 1949 channel is breaking down. That means that intimacy is also breaking down. We also know that the 3420 channel is being defined. And that is really about go, 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 doing, doing, doing. It's doing in the now. However, without gate 57 or gate 10, there is no awareness of what it is that I should be doing. So the inner intuition that is guiding you as to knowing what it is that you should be doing. And there is no 10th gate, which is telling you that this is what you should be doing in order to take care of yourself. So something that is really benefiting you. And with this 3420 channel, people are going to be very busy. The intimacy is going to become less. Sexual aspects are going to become less important. So this is going to be a very, very interesting part, in my opinion, where how is sexuality going to evolve? Is it really going to be these one-night stands, Tinder-like, where you're just going to swipe, 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 and you're going to meet up, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and then go your way? Or are you going to avoid exactly that, where you're going to try to find the right person to be with, and you're going to develop that relationship and only be with that one person? Or is it going to be a mix of both? As with everything in the world, it's probably going to be a mix of both. But it's going to be very interesting to see how intimacy is going to change and most likely become less physical in nature. That's what is assumed. And when I'm reading through all these keys that are shifting, I have a feeling that this could very well be the case. How do you feel about that?
I think it's very interesting because we've seen a shift in the last, half a decade of people opening up about their sexuality in different ways. So, like everything else that we've said, right? Like there's been this shift, and this has probably been the most recent shift, maybe, of people being more open about their sexuality and it not following like conventional norms. So I think we will see more of that going forward. And I wonder if it's more of a lean toward like being asexual versus like Tinder hookup culture. So it'll just be very interesting to see how that plays out as more people start to be born closer to / after 27.
Yeah, that's another assumption that things are just going to become more asexual. But yeah, it's a less physical intimacy. So it's also going to be a more individual intimacy, maybe, where you're becoming more and more intimate with yourself, or more vulnerable, more open with yourself as well. So yeah, it's very, very, I'm curious as to what will happen. So the next one we're going to take a look at is gate 10 from the locks. And that is the behavioral code. So very easy to understand. It is basically how we are meant to behave. And this is where I really liked where John Dempsey was talking about the 33 before Christ. That's when it started, with the vessel of love actually being the locks and the keys at the same time. And I liked how he was saying people were trying to figure out what behavior actually means, how to work around it, what is it like to define behavior in the first place. And I think it does correlate with how society was built up. I think this is something that really does shift every now and then. Back then, when my grandparents were little, they had to learn the proper way to behave by Knicke. I don't know if you know that, but that's like the German way, or I think he was German, but this was the way to behave, how you should eat when you have 5 forks and knives in front of you, how you should start eating according to these forks and knives, where the glass should be located, and like how then the modernized version came of you shouldn't have your phone out when you're talking to people, when you're in company, blah, blah, blah. So there are just behavioral patterns that came about throughout history. And in this case, we're shifting from this consistent focus that we were taught to have for the last 400 plus years. And we're shifting into show your strength. So into gate 34, from gate 9 to gate 34. This is going to be a very interesting shift, especially considering the rise in ADHD. So I'm wondering if these are just people that are picking up on this new shift as well. So it's not just, but I'm saying that I think this rise of ADHD is, yes, first of all, it's being diagnosed more because there's now symptoms that have been defined for ADHD. So our grandparents didn't have this term in the first place. It didn't exist back then, officially at least. I'm sure people still had ADHD, but it was just not as clear. And it was also, I think people back then moved way more. So they were physically working more. So that was as well, with a population of 70% of generators out there and manifesting generators, they were able to burn through their sacral energy. So I think this is also, there are many, many different aspects of why ADHD is on the rise. Another one is that kids weren't in front of the TV as much. They were outside playing in nature, getting themselves dirty, releasing all of that pent-up energy. We are now shifting from you have to sit still, you have to focus on the details, you have to learn everything in school and remember all of the dates and numbers and whatever it may be. That is now shifting to show your strength, to gate 34, where this is something that we mentioned before pressing record with Trump, how he is showing his strength and he's really already kind of jumping onto the bandwagon of the next generation, of this next chapter that is opening up, where he's kind of thumping his chest like a gorilla and showing his strength, and he's making it in a very basic way so that everyone can understand that. He doesn't use big words, he doesn't use anything fancy, but he speaks to the people with the words of the people.
On a slightly different note, I don't know where I heard it, but recently it was noted that if someone came back, or if someone from the past came into the future, the one thing that would be the same for like the last 2 or 3 centuries is the way kids are educated. And like, were we talking about this? I can't remember if you and I were having this conversation or not, but like, in the sense of you go to school, you open a book, someone lectures you, you maybe do a problem or two to learn it yourself, but the structure of school has not changed in literally hundreds of years. And I wonder if this shift is also going to be the advent of different scholastic models, in the sense of I've seen so many more kids, especially in this post-COVID world, go from normal school to homeschooling, but homeschooling in a different way, not in like the typical read a book, answer these questions, take a test kind of way. It's more of like fluid, allowing them to explore their strengths. So more of like the Montessori like style of learning, but for like teenagers. So it's interesting hearing you say it and then connecting the dots with what I've heard recently of, I wonder if this will be the advent of school changing, because I mean, kids have been learning, people have been learning for millennia, but I wonder if this is going to be the actual change in all of that.
I think it will. And I think when I'm reading through the gates and what other people also say about it, I really do think that it will. And I'm crossing my fingers. And you said the last few hundred years. So I'm wondering if this was 400 years, 411 years, because this is when this whole cycle started. And also even in the last 50-something years. So I don't know, whenever the first line started, you're saying absolutely the right thing with parenting started to shift. The way that we parent our children started to shift. People are starting to pull out their kids more out of schools. They're self-educating, or I know that this is still a minority, but it's still something that has become more acceptable. I do think that the individual aspect, your individual strengths and power, is going to be more of a focus, especially with this new rave children generation as well coming along. I think there is going to be quite a bit of shift in that aspect. Hopefully. I mean, I wish that schools are really going to be about the strengths of the individual.
I just did a quick Google, and the Renaissance, like the proper Renaissance, was between like the 13 and 15-ish hundreds. And I feel like post-Renaissance is kind of when we got into this more rigid form of schooling. So yeah, it kind of lines up.
Yeah, because in the Renaissance, it was still, you had a master. You were learning from people. I mean, yeah, maybe there were also a few schools, but it was more connected to you want to learn from this master, so you would go there and learn from him. If it was, I don't know, Michelangelo or I don't know,
Da Vinci, one of the Ninja Turtles.
Oh, the Ninja Turtles. Okay, so the last one we're going to talk about today, gate 15, lock 15, which is the pattern. And we are moving from the logical patterns, which was what the last era was all about, moving from gate 16, the skills, which is in the logical circuitry. That's why logical pattern. We're moving into the abstract pattern. So we're moving into gate 20. So gate 15, the pattern, is very much about the flow of life. It is about extreme rhythms. And if you do have that in your chart and you're connecting with someone with gate 5, then it can really rock your world. It's something that is very challenging to be compatible with when you're in a relationship with them or something like that, because you will disrupt one another. But in this case, gate 15 is really about this extreme pattern and balancing these extremes. So it's about being in the flow, and the way that you're going to be in the flow here in up to 2027, it was harnessing your skills. This is something that our parents drilled into us, that our grandparents drilled into us. You really need to be good at something. You need to hone in on your skills and practice and practice and practice. Practice makes perfect. That is going to change. So we're going from focus, the way of, or the behavioral code of focus, where you are having a conversation with someone and you have to focus. You're in school and you have to focus. You have to focus at work, things like that. We're also shifting patterns from honing in on your skills to gate 20 of making the right decisions in the now. So this is really about honing in on your ability to know when to make decisions and to make the right decisions in the now. Listen to your intuition. It's just going to throw everything around. We're going to be very confused because we're going to be so focused on honing in on our skills, and now we're supposed to tune in to our own intuition and being like, okay, when is the right move? When is it right to make this move? And when can I release all that sacral energy? The 3420 is going to be a lot about that. But we need to understand when to take this move, when to use that energy, instead of just being busy for the sake of being busy, which is a tendency of the 3410. This is going to be a very, very big thing that is going to continuously come back and be a theme in the next 400 years, that we feel the pressure to be busy for the sake of being busy. So manifesting generator energy, a lot of it coming up. And it can feel, I'm assuming it's going to feel quite overwhelming for all the non-sacral beings. That's my assumption. Because we are going to feel under pressure of doing all the time. So I'm not sure if this is going to come into fruition, but this is what I feel when I'm reading that this is the pressure we're going to be feeling. And it's going to be a very, very interesting new chapter. I keep saying that, but I do really actually find it very interesting what is going to happen. So
I feel like we're kind of seeing this with like Gen Alpha already, right? Not really necessarily honing on a skill, maybe not fantastic in the communication piece of it, of like, they're very good at explaining what they're feeling in the moment already. So I think it'll be very interesting to see this shift on a grander scale in the next couple of years, when these kids who are experiencing it already to some extent, more so than we have 30 years ago. Like, that dates me, I feel like, so much. But like, obviously we were born 30 plus years ago. So it's interesting to see the difference in the generation now already. starting to feel a little bit more into themselves and their intuition, but still be a bit disconnected in what we think, right? So like, I think you and I generationally probably prioritize being in the moment with each other and putting distractions away. Whereas their in the moment is, I'm just taking screens as an example, but like being in front of their screen is kind of in their moment, in their now. So it's interesting seeing that. I see that as rude, but for them, it's a means of connecting differently. So I think I have to take my boomer brain out of it and see it through this light and understanding that the energy is shifting and they're just following what the energy is for them, you know?
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I think that's one thing that I would have a challenge with, because I think this is where the ninth gate would impact me, of being focused on one another and feeling respected through the focus, which I also find interesting. So it could also be, however, that the way that we're shifting towards is actually right, quad right. That's the path that we're taking. So when we're considering that aspect, then them being on the phone doesn't really matter, because they have this spatial awareness and they will pick up everything that is happening around them, because they're kind of unfocusedly focused. So they're not in need of having this concrete focus one-on-one, like I'm putting all my attention to you, I'm looking at you, I don't have my distractions. But for a quad right, or for someone that has the personality at least facing right, they are able to focus, quote unquote, on their phone while also picking up what is happening around them. So it's kind of like a non-focused focus. Yeah. So from that perspective, I understand. It's just a matter of, I think what is important to me, that if it, in the end, after the conversation, they're able to give back what I've said.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to have this information, I just feel like there was such a disconnect when millennials entered the workforce and baby boomers were like, bro, we don't understand you. Whereas now Gen Z is entering the workforce and it's still kind of happening because it's generationally so different from what we are. But I think that there's a bit more understanding in that regard, at least for me having this information. So I think we're already kind of ahead of the curve in that sense, but it's very interesting seeing the societal shifts, literally global shifts, that we are going to be collectively feeling over the next couple of years start to come into action. It's wild.
Yeah, agreed. That also brings us to a good point, because this is where human design and even astrology is extremely helpful, because we're kind of getting prepared as to what is coming, and that provides us with more understanding and acceptance, in my opinion. So really understanding what is about to happen may reduce the curveball, so to speak. I feel like we don't have concrete answers as to what exactly is going to happen, but we have several different possibilities, and we can prepare for these possibilities in a way that we don't feel so overwhelmed, in my opinion. At least that's how I feel about it. So human design in everything has helped me to be more accepting and understanding, especially when it comes to people around me. Even if I don't know their design, I just kind of explain it away through using my human design knowledge. But yeah, I think that's the same with these cycles. It just helps me feel more relaxed about the whole situation as to what is coming. How do you feel about it? Mr. and Mrs. listening to this episode. That would be really interesting for us to know how you feel about it, knowing all of this information. This was just the first part. We're going to be covering the next part next week.
Buckle up. Stay tuned. It's probably not going to be as long next week because we don't have to go for the intro, but it's still going to be hefty. So, yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Bye.
Hey guys, welcome back to HeartCore, the human design podcast. I'm Chell. That's Miko. Hey.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Celestina.
Hey guys. Happy New Year?
It's getting close to New Year.
No, but by the time this is posted, will it be New Year?
No, not yet. Like, it's getting close to it because the
Va
last
bene.
one we're posting is Mariah Carey 26,
The 19th.
I think. And then we have one more. Okay, then. No, Wham! 19th. Then Mariah Carey 26.
Wham 19th.
Then...
The Mariah. So it will be the New Year.
Is it the New Year already? Okay. Is it already the
It's
New Year? Oh my God! That's scary.
Okay, so we have the 19th. Yeah, it'll be the New Year. All of this is going in bloopers, by the way.
I figured.
All right, let's try this again. You ready? Pronto?
Yeah, Ananda is going crazy because he found the fly again. I don't know if you can hear him, but he's running around like a mad dog or like a panther in a cage. Okay, one more. No. My God, this was a long one. That's an interesting point that you bring up, though, because do you hear him? He's growling and barking. What? I can't hear you. Okay, so this is an interesting point you brought. Now you heard him. But what is going on? I need to check this. Hey, it's okay. What's going on? Nothing.
Is that your gentle parenting technique? Hi, buddy. What's up? Are you okay? Is that your
Why
gentle
does
parenting?
everyone always make fun of my gentle parenting? My brother always makes fun of me. He's like, you can't just be, oh, everything is fine. I'm like, yeah, I can. I mean, if he was a kid, I would just ask him, so what's going on? What's happening? But I can't. So, yeah.
Yeah. Mine now wants to leave the room. She said, "Arr," so please hold. I'm not letting you back in once you leave, though. Once you're out, bro. Okay? Love you.
Whatever, Mom. Don't
Kids,
tell me
man.
you love me.
Kids. Okay, let's marker all this shit. You're editing this one, yeah?
Yep. I've got internet now. It's gonna be hell.
You were saying something is interesting.
I was saying,